Let me just start by asking you, have you or the chief executive seen an actual full draft of the law yet?
Good morning. I have not seen it myself. I'm not so sure about our chief executive, but I'm sure she's been much more informed than myself of the content of the bill. Perhaps not in the detail of the actual drafting, but I'm sure she must know the basic gist of the whole bill.
The problem with these bills, especially if they're vague and you only know the gist, is the potential that there could be abuse of power, particularly if Beijing tries some of these cases itself. What are your thoughts there?
I'm not so worried about that because I'm sure by the time the law is being promulgated to Hong Kong law, it will be very specific because that's the way how the law is being adjudicated in Hong Kong. So it has to be very specific. So I look forward to the announcement of the bill being passed. So right now, yes, I think obviously that we have two different jurisdictions here. So their way of passing the law is rather different from the Hong Kong way. So I think that's why there's a bit of confusion because we don't know exactly what's inside the detail. But I'm sure by the time it be passed, when it's promulgated to Hong Kong, it will be very clear. And so people should know, what is allowed, what is not allowed.
There seems to be a lot of blind faith from supporters of this bill, Bernard, because as you say, you haven't seen it. You can't say with any great certainty that the chief executive has seen it. So what makes you so confident that when it is enacted, it's not going to be in conflict with the common law, that it's not going to undermine the business community and business dealings, and it's not going to undermine human rights?
When I say that we don't know the exact detail, but we know the framework of the bill is to address national security, specifically in 4 areas: subverting the state power, secessions, and terrorism act, and foreign interference. So these are 4 specific areas that the bill targeted. So I think we basically know what it is. Of course, it still boils down to the actual interpretation and enforcement. So that needs to be determined. But even without the details, our Secretary of Justice in Hong Kong and also our Secretary for Security also repeatedly reassure us that the law will be enforced in Hong Kong. So under the Hong Kong law, common law jurisdiction. So it's quite clear that even though the law is being legislated in the mainland, but the enforcement and the adjudication will be in Hong Kong. So I have great comfort that the mainland authority are already taking to the one country, two system into consideration when they draft this bill. Otherwise, they could have simply just enforced the mainland national security law to Hong Kong, but they didn't. They know specifically that this is dealing with Hong Kong and there's very different jurisdictions, so they would want to make sure that these specifically designed national security law can apply and can work in Hong Kong.
So, Bernard, we've seen from Beijing over the past few years the detention of short sellers, the abduction of booksellers in Hong Kong, most recently the continued detention of the 2 Canadians in what is widely said to be retaliation for the detention of a Huawei executive. The Prime Minister of Canada said that himself. So with all this evidence of the way that Beijing handles cases like this, how can the people of Hong Kong be expected to have trust or confidence that their cases, if they arise, may be handled fairly?
Well, first of all, I won't comment on those 2 specific incidents that you mentioned because those apply on the mainland side. And this specific new national security law is strictly for Hong Kong under a total different jurisdiction. So I'm sure that there's a reason, again, I'm repeating myself again, why they decided to establish a new law specifically for Hong Kong is due to the difference of that 2 systems. So, and I'm pretty sure China would want to continue the 2 systems. Otherwise, they could easily just apply that, their own national security law to Hong Kong. And repeatedly, the mainland authority in the last 1 or 2 years, they have assured the Hong Kong community, the business community, that the one country, 2 system will stay, provided that the national security is being protected. So I think that they cherish the 2 systems, the common law jurisdictions. They want to make sure that people remain with their confidence. So I'm pretty sure that this will remain. Now, of course, until time passes, and we won't know how this things will turn out. But I have reason to believe that China wants to make sure the two system and the investors and the business people and just the well-being of Hong Kong people will remain as it is.
But Bernard, even within Hong Kong, the Bar Association is now saying that the chief executive's ability to appoint judges would undermine the judicial independence of the city. So are the benefits of this law for the government really worth the hit that Hong Kong's reputation would take?
Again, without seeing the details yet, but from what I was told, the chief executive will appoint a panel of judges, but at the end, it will still be up to the judiciary themselves to decide to assign different judges for different cases. So it's not like the chief executive just appoint a specific judge for a specific case. So that's not the case, according to the chief executive herself. But again, let's all wait for the details to come forward. Now, regarding to whether it's worth it, well, I think national security is important. And when we fail, Hong Kong have failed in the last 23 years to come up. Now, China had delegated that authority to Hong Kong to legislate the national security law. But in 23 years, the opposition have tried every efforts to stall that process. And the event last year basically gave China now no confidence that Hong Kong can continue without this piece of legislation. So they gave them no choice to come in and legislate this piece of law for us. So unfortunately, it is what it is. And again, national security law, it's common in every country. Why shouldn't Hong Kong have one?
Bernard, in the past, you have said that you expected this law to have a deterrent effect, that it would actually not be used as much. But right now, you're saying that it's really needed in Hong Kong. So how much do you expect this law, once implemented, to be put into use?
Well, again, the piece of law is a deterrent factor. And I was told that they don't have a retrospective effect. So it's really to warn people, do not cross that red lines. You cannot ask for Hong Kong independence, and we do not tolerate terrorist act like what happened last year during the social unrest. So long the people abide by the law, I suppose that we never have to use this piece of legislation. Mind you, Macau, another special administrative region in China, they passed their similar national security law back in 2009. And so far, from what I was told, not a one case has been prosecuted under that piece of legislation. So I suppose if people behave accordingly and we do not cross those red lines, we never need to use this piece of legislation.
So mainland security agents will be able to open offices and operate in Hong Kong. We heard from another NPC member, Tam Yung Chung, saying that he thinks for serious cases, Beijing should be able to reserve jurisdiction and that extradition remains a possibility. So the extradition law was scrapped, of course, after the protests over much of the past 12 months. So is it still possible that the extradition law will be reintroduced under this?
No, I do not believe that. Any law that needs to be passed in Hong Kong, we have to go through the Legislative Council. And, there is actually an election coming up in September. So I don't think there is any, possibility that the extradition bill will be introduced within this term of office. But of course, in the future, nobody will know. But definitely in this term of office, under the Chief Executive Carrie Lam, I highly doubt that.
So we saw a report on Now TV saying that for succession, subversion, these are very broadly, vaguely defined acts of criminality, that life sentences could be imposed. Can you confirm or deny on that? And is that entirely necessary?
I can't confirm, nor I can deny, because I haven't seen the details of the bill. So I don't know. But then again, I've seen national security bills in other jurisdictions, in Singapore and elsewhere, and I believe that their sentence is actually very harsh in those jurisdictions, including the U.S. too. But I have not seen the Hong Kong version yet, so I'm yet to find out.
Right. So I'm glad you mentioned other countries that have security laws, because these are countries that have democracies have open judicial systems, which Hong Kong has had until this point. But with the oversight of China, is that not, a point that can be made that you now you potentially have a national security law within a judicial system that has no longer retained its independence?
And again, as I repeat again, the Hong Kong jurisdiction is uniquely Hong Kong. Your viewers may actually realize that most of the judges in the senior courts of Hong Kong are not even local. Because when Hong Kong returned back to China back in 1997, we retained the entire judiciary system. So foreign judges or non-local judges are allowed to continue to adjudicate cases, and remain the same way even up to now. So I was told that this will remain as well, even apply to the national security law. I don't know the detail yet, but I'm very sure that the common law jurisdiction and our judiciary independence will remain. And that's why Hong Kong remains to be the top 5 arbitration center in the world, because people believe in our independent judiciary.
Are you concerned about U.S.-Hong Kong relations? We have heard about potential sanctions against individuals and even banks.
In fact, not just myself. I'm from the financial services, but many of the people in the financial industry, bankers, have told me that they are not worried about the national security law. In fact, the national security law will help the businesses because, Hong Kong were very uncertain last year with all the riots and protests. But now, if things return to back to normality, people actually prefer to come back to Hong Kong to put money in Hong Kong. So they're happy about it. What they are concerned, though, however, is the reaction from their home jurisdiction. Notably the U.S. or could be UK or and elsewhere. So they are worried about what their respective home jurisdiction will do to their companies. So many of the bankers told me that they're not worried about the Chinese security law, but they worry about some of these unnecessary sanctions from their home jurisdiction.
Exactly, which is my question to you. Are you worried about that? Are you worried about these countries putting these sanctions that may hinder business relations with Hong Kong? Not to mention what happens if the special trading status from the U.S. is revoked. Is all of this, the national security law, along with all of the protests and all of the negativity that comes with it, really worth it, given Hong Kong's future, especially as a financial hub?
Well, as you rightly put, we are the top 3 financial hub in the world, and there's tons of U.S. interest in Hong Kong. I won't be surprised to find not half of all the financial service providers in Hong Kong are U.S. based. So if the U.S. decide to put a sanction on Hong Kong, they could, but I just don't see why it's in their interest as well, because it end up hurting their interest, if not as much as our own interest. So it's definitely a lose-lose situation. So, I can hear the rhetoric. I can see why some of these countries want to put pressure on China. But for them to put a sanction on Hong Kong, it just doesn't make sense because it will end up hurting them as much as hurting us.
Is there actually any meaningful mechanism for consultation for this security law? Or Hong Kong is just expecting to be cut out of this whole process? I mean, there is a reason why people in Hong Kong right now feel like this is the end of, one party, 2 systems.
You mean one country, 2 systems? But the trouble
One country,
is,
2 systems, I should say.
Yeah, unfortunately, China has been very patient with Hong Kong. They gave us 23 years to allow us. In fact, we tried. We actually made one attempt back in 2003, but we failed to pass the law. So they gave us 23 years. So they give us enough time to debate and talk about it. But by now, they realize that the opposition would continue to use the stall tactics, and there's no intention whatsoever to pass this law. So I think unfortunately, I agree, this is not ideal. It would be better that we pass this law in Hong Kong. By the way, Article 23, which is the Constitution requiring us to pass national security law, is still there. We are still required to do that. But the mainland authority decided that they have to make sure that this law is being passed to protect their interests. It's not just about Hong Kong. They are worried about the foreign forces will be using Hong Kong to destabilize the mainland. So they have to pass this law to protect their interests as well. And we failed that. We failed to do so 23 years. And unfortunately, this time around, I don't think there's much of an input from our side. Of course, they have consulted myself. We are a member of the National People Congress, so they have consulted us. But they are very determined to pass this law now because they feel that with the unrest last year, with all the political interference from the West, they decided that there's no more time that they can wait to pass this national security law.